You know, he's something of an Iron Man himself. We're talking about Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin, aka the Iron Patriot. Hi, I'm Nando, and in this series, we take a character from Marvel Comics, we talk about their backstory, their power set, their personality, and we give you some reading recommendations. And this week, we have a character from a book that is so much fun, because we are talking about the Iron Patriot. Alright, so the character Norman Osborn has been around forever. He's a fixture of Marvel Comics, Spider-Man comics specifically. He is as close as Spider-Man has to an arch nemesis as the Green Goblin. However, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking specifically about the period in Norman Osborn's life where he tried to become everything. The leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., the leader of the Avengers, and the biggest hero on Earth. And it all came crashing down. And the alias he used during some of this was the Iron Patriot. And in case anybody's confused, yes, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there is an armor called the Iron Patriot armor, shows up in Iron Man 3. The worst Iron Man movie, you can tell because it's the one that has Bill Maher. But that was just using this idea of a Captain America-styled Iron Man suit owned by the government and a somewhat corrupted version of the Iron Man suit, although obviously not in this case to the same degree. But besides that, the Iron Patriot suit in the comics does not have any connection to James Rhodes or the Mandarin storyline or anything like that. It is an invention of Norman Osborn. Well, that's not fair. It is an invention of Tony Stark that was painted by Norman Osborn. We'll get to it. And this is going to start with important issue number 1. This is Thunderbolts, issue 110, written by Warren Ellis, with art by Mike Deodato Jr., Ryan Barreto, Richard Starklings, and Albert DeCane. And this all takes place in the aftermath of the Civil War event, which is a very popular Marvel Comics event, which was adapted into the movie, Captain America Civil War, and it followed the same kind of idea. Iron Man was pro-registering all of the superhumans, Captain America was against it. They each formed their teams, they fought. In the comics, it starts because a supervillain blew up a school in a fight with some superheroes that was so public that got people really interested in figuring out what to do with superheroes. But either way, during Civil War, the Superhuman Registration Act was put into place, and the superheroes were taken in by the government. The ones that didn't want to comply, didn't want to register. And the government assembled a team called the Thunderbolts that had already existed. This was a team that had been run by Baron Zemo. The really simple explanation for what the Thunderbolts were: originally they were a team of supervillains masquerading as heroes, so they all created new identities. Screaming Mimi turned into Songbird, Moonstone turned into Meteorite, and they pretended to be superheroes to fill a power vacuum because all the superheroes were in another dimension. So they were like, we'll do this, and we'll have fun, and make lots of money, and get all this stuff, and we'll be awesome. Now, Baron Zemo, who was in charge of this group as Citizen V, had ulterior motives and he wanted to take over the world, and this team was called the Thunderbolts. So by the end of the first arc of this book, almost all of the main characters, to different degrees and for different reasons, wanted to stay as heroes. They did not want to come out and be villains and take over the Earth. So they fought with Baron Zemo, and they became this team of somewhat anti-hero. And it makes sense, this is explained in the books, but there's one really great early Thunderbolts issue where Black Widow tracks down Songbird and Mach 1, and she's basically like, listen, I'm pretty sure I know who all of you guys are, but I'm not positive yet. I just want to tell you guys, because you seem cool, your boss is insane, he's gonna get you all killed. But you can turn now and be good, and maybe you'll be cool. And remember, half of the Avengers were bad guys at one point. There was a point when a lot of the Avengers left, and it was just Captain America, Hawkeye, Wanda, and Quicksilver. And everybody but Captain America there was a bad guy that had reformed. So there is a path forward. And, they didn't immediately change their ways, but that was how that team was going to go. Anyway, so Norman Osborn takes control of this team. And Norman Osborn by this time has built up a lot of credibility. He does not have the Green Goblin disease or mania that comes with that. He's just a normal businessman who wants to use his great money and intelligence to help out. That's what he's convinced everybody, and kind of what he's convinced himself. Because the great thing about Iron Patriot is, and this is why this book is so much fun, all of these books, basically everything's starting here. From the beginning, you can tell Norman Osborn does not have it together, but he is trying as hard as he possibly can to hold it together, to hold this insane team together, and to keep his goblin identity from the surface, because it's always bubbling up and you can always tell. And it's a thing where it's he's taking medication, but at the same time, he's just trying to repress it. He's not trying to address it in a way that's responsible. And he's also still an evil guy. He's just not flying around on a glider and cackling, but he's using the law to get all his revenge on the superheroes, because now the law is very anti-superhero. So anyway, Norman Osborn's able to weasel his way into being in charge of this team, the Thunderbolts. And it is a disaster, because he stocks it with villains that he cannot control. And Norman Osborn's big flaw here, besides being evil, is thinking that he can control some of these people. people, because this team he creates is insane. There's some characters on it who aren't really anything that exciting. A swordsman who's one of the Strucker children who's working with Osborne because he wants him to clone his dead sister. Radioactive Man. Songbird, at this point, basically a good guy. Penance, who's this very strange version of a character named Speedball, who was involved in that explosion that caused the superhuman registration thing, and now he has to harm himself to use his superpowers, and pretty much everybody that's around this guy's like, this guy's not working, and also, like, he's bashing his head into a wall, so he's not helping us. But then he's got Matt Gargan's Venom, who's the Scorpion, but with the Venom symbiote, who has way less control over the Venom symbiote than you would want in this situation. The Venom symbiote is basically constantly asking Matt Gargan to eat people. It eats a guy's arm in their first mission. It's a mess. Bullseye, who is a full psychopath, is so bad that they don't even actually let him do stuff as a member of the Thunderbolts, because Thunderbolts is a public team. They basically like hide Bullseye in the corner and have him go, assassinate the superheroes when nobody else is doing it, but like they don't put him on camera because Bullseye is so unredeemable that he would never work on this team. And then Moonstone, who I love, and we will get to her in a couple of videos, but like absolutely 100% cannot be managed on a team like this. I'll say this, and listen, these don't have to be completely comprehensive, right? Reading recommendation number 2, Thunderbolts Volume 1, Issue 113. There's only a few issues later, but I think this is a perfect issue to describe the problem that Norman is going to face throughout this entire series, and easily one of the funniest moments in comics. There's a lot of really funny moments in these books. Norman Osborn is giving the Thunderbolts a presentation on a superhero they are going to get. His name is the Steel Spider. He's not affiliated with Spider-Man, but he's definitely inspired by Spider-Man, and he's just a guy who invented a set of basically Dr. Octopus arms with extra weapons on him, and he uses that as a superhero persona, fights crime in Phoenix, Arizona, and he's causing lots of damage. It is the perfect, legitimate reason for the Superhuman Registration Act, because this guy is hurting people, he's causing trouble in a way that's like counterproductive for the superheroes, so the Thunderbolts seem to bring him in. And during the presentation on this character, Norman gets really into it, and I will read you these panels. Norman says, "Yes, I want them to see. I want them all to see what happens to Spider-Man when he defies the new order of things. I am the new order of things. Control over all superhero activities, the new order of things. Spider-Man needs to learn that, with a public beating and an example made to all his little friends." Steel Spider. "Yes. You said Spider-Man." "No, I didn't. I said Steel Spider. Man." "You did it again." "No. Steel Spider. Steel Spider. Why would I say Spider-Man?" "I don't know. Shut up." And this is 3 issues in, so this is not going to get better for Norman. Even though he doesn't want to admit that he's still obsessed with Spider-Man and still got the Green Goblin juice in him, he does. Also, at one point during this Thunderbolts run, because she's incredible, Moonstone switched out Norman Osborn's medication, hoping that it destabilized him. That didn't work that time, but clearly, like, the other shoe was going to fall. So Norman Osborn makes political moves because that's what he's good at. He gets the team more high-profile missions, gets more power, and eventually we get the Secret Invasion event. The Skrulls have taken over everything, and Norman Osborn sends the Thunderbolts to defend Washington, D.C. They join forces with the Avengers. It's part of a big fight everybody's watching, and Norman Osborn himself kills Skrull Queen Varanki on TV. So this cements Norman as a national hero, leads to his appointment to oversee the Avengers Initiative and the Superhuman Registration Act. He replaces Tony Stark. He's basically at the top, and this sets the stage for his biggest move. He rebrands SHIELD, the Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement Logistics Division, or whatever, as HAMMER, an acronym that stands for nothing. They formed a group called the Cabal, made up of other supervillains like Doctor Doom, Loki, Emma Frost. And then Norman Osborn retooled the Thunderbolts into something that we would call, he obviously wouldn't call them this, although maybe he would like by himself, but the public wouldn't know them as this, the Dark Avengers. And this was a team of either people that were supposed to stand in for individual Avengers, seem like them, or people that were supposed to take the place of that character in a role similar to that character. So for example, Moonstone basically pretended to be Miss Marvel. She was the new Miss Marvel. She dressed like Miss Marvel. She called herself Miss Marvel. Whereas Ares was the new Thor, but he was still just Ares. And you were like, he's the Thor of this team. Other members of this team, Venom, Mac Gargan was Spider-Man, and he got a pill, I think, that made him go from Big Monster Man to little Spider-Man shaped guy, which was helpful. Then you had Akihiro, then going by Dakan as the new Wolverine. Marvel boy Novar was the Captain Marvel of this team, although he wouldn't last long because, and one of my other favorite moments in these books, he and Moonstone slept together, and while they were hanging out afterwards, she said, "Isn't it great that we're all supervillains and nobody knows?" And Novar went, "Wait, what?" And then he just left. He was never seen again by the team because he's like a good guy who just didn't know what was going on. He had gotten arrested a bunch because he was like an alien from another dimension, but like he didn't want to join a team of supervillains. Bullseye was on this team as Hawkeye, and then, most importantly, you had the Sentry on the team as the Sentry. Now Norman realized that something was missing from this team. There's a space we're not filling. And at the same time, he was trying to break into a secret vault that Tony Stark had in Avengers Tower. So he had Ghost go in and open it, and Ghost opened the vault, and they found Tony Stark's armors. And that's when Norman Osborn realized, oh yeah, this is what we're missing. So he took an Iron Man armor that Tony Stark had made, reprogrammed it a little bit, but mostly just painted it to look like Captain America, and called himself the Iron Patriot. And unlike the Thunderbolts, he was the leader of this Avengers in the field as well. And this book is amazing. I love this team. I love everything that's going on here because there's so many different identities. They're not just all bad guys. Some of them are manipulative. Some of them, like Ares, feel like they have a lot of honor and this is something they should do. So Norman can get away with certain things, but not other things. He can trick certain members of the team, but not other members of the team. Some people will take advantage of the fact that he is clearly going Green Goblin crazy, and some of them will look past it. They fight some Atlanteans, they fight the Molecule Man. This team is punching way above their weight class. They're almost always losing, but then eventually coming out on top. And it is eating Norman Osborn up in the inside. I would say the most interesting component of this story is Norman's relationship with the Sentry. Because you can tell Norman knows he needs to use the Sentry. He needs to get this incredibly powerful figure on his side. Especially because he is proven very difficult to control. As people who know the Sentry know, he has some sort of maybe secondary identity called the Void that's a big evil monster. Or maybe it doesn't exist, maybe it's just in his head. At this point, no one's really sure. But the Sentry is really scared of all of that. And Norman Osborn, as the former Green Goblin, is able to connect with the Sentry, be like, listen, I get it. I also have an evil alter ego in my head that's trying to make me kill everybody, but if you do breathing exercises and you believe in yourself, everything's gonna be okay. And Sentry likes this. Sentry connects with Norman Osborn, and this does seem to help Sentry. However, Norman is still very scared of the Sentry, and he doesn't really have a plan for how to deal with him. Norman also got really involved with the X-Men's Utopia event. He arrests Professor X and Beast and makes his own Dark X-Men, a team that includes Mystique, Dark Beast, Akihiro Daken goes over there. We have Namor, Weapon Omega, and Cloak and Dagger. These guys are all led by Emma Frost. This is another area where Norman starts losing control, and it ends with Emma Frost revealing that she is a double agent. They defeat the Dark X-Men and the Dark Avengers, and everything's good. And then we get into the grand finale of Norman Osborn's whole deal, the Dark Reign. Basically, for this event, the UFOs, it doesn't matter who they are, framed the Asgardians for a massacre in Chicago, which gave Norman Osborn the justification to attack Asgard, which was now a small city floating in Oklahoma, kind of like New Asgard in the Thor movies now. And this was an event called Siege. It was very fun. You had the Avengers, you had the Young Avengers, the Secret Warriors. Everybody joined forces to battle Norman and his team, which included the government, because he's in charge of all of Hammer. I'll talk more about how this ends in another one of the season's videos. And this includes what is my last reading recommendation. Again, a lot of the times these aren't just like the most important books, but just books that I find memorable and think are fun. I would say you could read all the Dark Avengers books. There's not that many of them. And you could read all of Siege. There's like 4 Siege books. But I would say Siege Volume 1, Issue 2 is part of this Norman Osborn completely losing control. This issue was written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Oliver Copiel, Mark Morales, Lauren Martin, and Chris Elopoulos. Not to spoil it, but if you've spent some time on the internet, you've probably seen these panels. Norman Osborn tells Sentry to take over the city. Taskmaster tells Osborn he should turn around. Norman Osborn says, what are you? And we just see over the course of 4 panels, Captain America's shield slam into the face of Iron Patriot. It's the best. It's so good. This event is basically the end of Norman Osborn as Iron Patriot, although it's obviously not the last thing he's done in the comics. And he does create another team very much like the Dark Avengers with a character we may talk about this month called Toxidoxy. Super weird, but I will say, to kind of spoil the end of Siege, Norman Osborn loses. Sentry's ripping guys in half. It's not good. Then the Void comes out, which makes everything even worse. And eventually the superheroes win, and Norman Osborn gets his mask knocked off, and it is revealed that underneath his big Iron Man mask, he has his face painted like Green Goblin. So this is like full off the rails, like he cannot be in charge anymore. And up until this point in the Dark Avengers and the Siege books, it had been somewhat clear that Norman Osborn was just going and hiding in the basement and doing Green Goblin stuff, but he was good at hiding it, or at least good at hiding it from everybody but Victoria Hand, so he was like getting away with it. But like this was the moment where it all completely fell apart. Now we were talking about Iron Patriot this week specifically because he is being added to the collectible card game Marvel Snap. In Marvel Snap, he is a 2-cost, 3-power card with the on-reveal ability, add a random 4, 5, or 6-cost card to your hand. If you're winning here after next turn, give it -4 cost. So I think this makes perfect sense. It's a take on the usual shield archetype, which involves recruiting other cards, adding them to your hand. In this case, Iron Patriot is recruiting specifically a 4, 5, or 6, which makes sense, especially the 4, because most of the Dark Avengers are on that side of the cost spectrum. Sentry is a 4 cost. Moonstone is a 4 cost, Ares is a 4 cost. And like the thought process behind Hammer was Norman Osborn wanted a team of superheroes that were really, really powerful, which meant sometimes he had to sacrifice control you could have over those superheroes. But it's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? They all turn evil and start killing each other, or just quit because they don't like you, which is, you know, what happens. But then, because Norman Osborn values power over everything else, the secondary part of this card comes into play. So not only are you recruiting a card, but it's a lot easier to bring that card onto the field if you can control one location. So this is very interesting. It's fun because, and I think this would be obvious, he's going to combo pretty well with Green Goblin, which honestly should be the opposite of how this should work. Iron Patriot should be undermined completely by Green Goblin. Who knows, maybe if you're playing a bounce deck, the Green Goblin ends on your side of the field, but a successful Green Goblin will make it way more likely that you're going to win that location in the future. And then you can be looking at a 0-cost Sentry or a 0-cost Ares, which is huge. He also combos very well with Victoria Hand, a card we're going to talk about next week, because this card is added to your hand. Also going to combo well with characters like Quinjet, Mockingbird. Not a whole lot of variants here, which I'm surprised by because Iron Patriot's a very cool looking card, and the base art by Ryan Kennard and Eduardo Mello looks great. Like that is a solid Norman Osborn Iron Patriot. The Pandart Studios version of Iron Patriot is clearly a take on the Iron Man 3 James Rhodes Iron Patriot, which is fine, but this is the only other variant for Iron Patriot. And like there are a lot of really good Dark Avengers covers that work for Iron Patriot. Especially some of the Dark Avengers 1 covers could work as cards for Iron Patriot. So I don't know, I hope in the future if they do make more Iron Patriot variants, they skew towards the Norman Osborn Iron Patriot, since like that's what we're doing here. I will say, we're talking about War Machine, this does work pretty well with War Machine and Iron Man. Like those are 4 and 5 cost cards that Iron Patriot may pull up, and then you may be able to use them next turn for like no cost, which would be huge. But yeah, like the Dark Avengers 1 variant by Adi Granov make a great Iron Patriot card. So would the one by Marko Jernovic. And then the Dark Avengers 8 variant for the Marvel 70th anniversary that is just Iron Patriot flying. Great card. And obviously the basic cover for Dark Avengers 1 with the silhouettes is iconic. So any of those I think should make it into the game at some point. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Bernardo Tellish, for helping me write these. Next video, we're talking about Victoria Hand, another character I cannot wait to tell you about. Speaking of things I can't wait to tell you about, let's talk about this video's sponsor, Nebula. You know Nebula, it is a subscription streaming service that I and a bunch of YouTubers helped to create. It focuses on giving the creators more power to make the cool stuff that you guys already like and giving you guys a better experience for watching it. That means all my videos go up ad-free. Some of them are early. The Nando V Movies videos are early. The Nando Cut videos are like a little early, but they're not as early because they're like a thing that happened yesterday usually. We curate different video lists based on what people are talking about. So if you're watching that new Dune show, for example, and you want to watch some videos about Dune, we've got a bunch of those. We make that really easy to find. You can just watch that. We also have Nebula Originals. So these are all kinds of things. We've got like a pro shoot of a play by Abigail Thorne. Patrick Willems has made a Christmas special. His full-length feature film about an evil coconut. He's got a new short film coming out with a cast full of actors like Zach Cherry, who fans of this channel, I mean, you know him from so many things. Perhaps he has been in Severance, you love Severance, Fallout, but I mean, realistically, a good portion of you know him as the guy who tells Spider-Man to do a flip, or the guy who is taping the Shang-Chi fight. But either way, he is in this, and that is something you can only watch on Nebula. Tom Nichols just made a documentary about gerontocracy, about how boomers have changed the world and government, and is it good, or is it even really a thing? A subject that has only gotten more relevant since this documentary came out. We have so many other cool things I think you guys are going to love. You'll find out about them soon. And I always say, a year of Nebula is a steal at $5 a month or $60 a year. But if you use the code TheNandoCut at checkout, you can get a year of Nebula for $36. It's a great deal. Check it out. Go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. Use the code thenandocut at checkout. I guarantee you'll find something cool you're going to like. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.